Okay, so I'm going to make a statement. And on the surface, this is going to sound like the dumbest thing anybody's ever said in the history of words. But by the end of this video, not only will you understand where I'm coming from, but you're going to agree with me. All right, so here's the statement. Old car people, classic car people, are the most environmentally friendly group in the universe of vehicles. Now chew on that for a second, okay? Because it sounds insane. Classic car people are the most environmentally friendly group in the universe of vehicles. Not people who buy new cars, not people who buy hybrids, not people who buy electric cars, not people who are involved in creating new forms of energy. No. Classic car people, people who keep old cars alive, who keep them on the road, who keep them running, who restore them, who hot rod them, who keep the old cars going, are actually the most environmentally friendly people of them all. It sounds backwards because, old cars, obviously, they're sloppy. They drink hydrocarbons like there's no tomorrow. They spew CO2 into the atmosphere like it's confetti. The owners, they drive around, they burn rubber and smile all the way to hell. They are the menace. They need to be stopped and their machines need to be eradicated. But it's the exact opposite of the truth. We live in an age of deception. We live in an age of polarization. And this didn't happen by accident. This has been brewing for generations now. And it's the governments and the corporations working together along with the think tanks and the institutions and the media that feed off of them that have created this environment where there's no discussion, there's no middle ground, there's no understanding of things. The less you know, the better off they are. People are kept deliberately in the dark. If you ever try to research facts on any of the trigger topics of the day, you'll always find completely contradictory information. This government agency says this, but this think tank says that. And this organization says the other thing. And none of them agree. And everything is exaggerated and distorted and very difficult to follow. It's all deliberately confusing, because they don't want discussion. They don't want you to see the other side. They don't want you to think for yourself. They just want you to go and consume, obey and consume. That's it. And the narrative today with the climate stuff that's going on, and I don't want to get involved in any of that, whether it's real or it's a hoax, or I don't know, I don't care, it doesn't make any difference. But it is the narrative that the world is operating by today. And it's the evolution of the car, of transportation, of society, is all based on this carbon deal and the goal of net zero. So the perception is that old cars are the enemy and everything needs to be swapped over to what the Chinese call new energy. New energy. It's all right. I don't even want to go there. So what I'm talking about here is not forbidden knowledge, not secret knowledge. There's no conspiracy or anything like that involved. But it's knowledge that they don't really want the average person to have. Now, for a car person, if you're really into cars, if you work on cars, you build cars, you're a mechanic, you're involved in it, you already know what I'm talking about. But to the average person is consuming cars, a consumer who's going to buy a car. This stuff is completely abstract. They don't think of new cars, a new car, as anything other than what they find on the showroom floor or on the dealer's lot. And they've all seen the pictures, the videos of assembly lines, so they know what the assembly line looks like. It's an abstract thought. Now, parts come down and robots weld stuff together and somebody puts a thing on and then it rolls down the assembly line, somebody shuts the hood and drives it off. That's all they ever see. That's what they know. And so their knowledge begins and ends there. And that actually extends into the world of car people as well, because you've got us nuts and bolts car people. We dig in and get dirty, and then you've got just casual car enthusiasts, automotive enthusiasts. And there's a polarization there, a real crazy polarization, and we're kind of in the middle of it, because it's the internal combustion engine people versus the battery people, or the electric people. And, you've got extremists on either end. 10% of either side can never be reached. You've got the coal rollers on one side, and you've got the virtue signalers on the other side, and those people are lost forever. They can't be part of any conversation. They're just committed to their ideas. But for us in the middle ground, it's time that we really start talking about this stuff. What really is environmentally sound? What is environmentally friendly? You can't measure it just from what comes out of the tailpipe of a car. But unfortunately, in today's world, tailpipe emissions are the thing that most people focus on. It's the simple thing. Everybody can understand that. What comes out of the tailpipe? Bad things come out of the tailpipe of an internal combustion engine car. Nothing comes out of the tailpipe of an EV. Now, we're going to talk about that in the next video. Actually, there are 2 more videos in this, covering this topic. But, you can only put so much into a video. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about actual fuels, how things are burned, and then we're going to talk about the cars themselves. But emissions, tailpipe emissions, are what people latch onto, missing the bigger picture. The trend, today's manufacturers, the trend is towards building bigger cars. The trend is towards building alternative energy cars. The trend is towards building disposable cars. They do not want these things to last more than the period of the loan or the period of the warranty. They want you to use it up, and they make it cost prohibitive to repair it and keep it going, forcing you to buy a new car, forcing the general public into new cars. And some would say that the eventual goal is to eliminate private car ownership entirely, which is political, and it's a whole different thing. Let's just talk about the nuts and the bolts. Let's talk about what energy is actually consumed and what the carbon footprint is of a car, new versus old. And for that, we're going to use this Jeep over here. So this Jeep, this is a 1998 Jeep. So obviously all of its construction, all of the energy used, the carbon burned, or the carbon released into the atmosphere for its construction was done a quarter of a century ago. So all this car is left with is what comes out of the tailpipe. But let's talk about what it took to really build this car. Because I said before, the average person just has this abstract idea of what an assembly line is and how cars are built. They don't see the nitty-gritty. So let's look at the components of this car. Let's pick a component and really examine it. All right. So a car, any car, is made up of literally hundreds of thousands of specialty components. And now spread this over all of the various manufacturers and the types of cars. So the variety is nearly endless. It's an unseen monster. The machine that creates things like cars, the industrial machine that creates things like cars, is so much bigger than just the individual manufacturers. People think of, it's General Motors, or it's Ford, or it's Toyota, or it's Honda, right? And they think that, well, that's it. All of the energy is expended by those manufacturers. But that's not the case at all, because each of these cars is assembled with thousands and thousands of parts that are sourced through individual vendors. The carbon footprint on a car, from the construction of a car, goes way, way beyond the assembly line. The assembly line is just that. It's the assembly line. It's where parts that were sourced, they were either manufactured by the automaker or sourced from outside vendors. That manufacturing process is 100 times the size of just the automaker itself. So let's pick a random part off of this car and let's look at exactly what we're talking about. So this power steering cap. This is about the most, mundane part. It serves no real purpose other than to keep power steering fluid in the reservoir. So it's really not a very consequential part. Its place could be taken by a well-stuffed rag, but that's besides the point. Let's look at this cap. It's full. Let's look at this cap and see exactly what went into this, because this was sourced through a vendor. Now, in the process of creating this cap, you first have to go back to the people that designed the cap. And then the cap has a bunch of individual components, and those individual components all had to be designed. And these people all had to work in offices, and the offices needed to be heated and cooled and lit. And they all had to get to and from work to do their thing, to design all of these individual components. All part of the carbon footprint. So looking at this thing, we have, let me sit down. We have the actual cap itself and the dipstick part of it, which is one piece. I assume it's one piece. Then we've got this spring. Okay, so you've got plastic here, which is petroleum, which had to be processed from oil and then cast into this shape. Now we've got this spring over here. So the spring steel, this comes from a different place. So this is from iron and all of the processes that it took to create that spring steel. So that's two. We've got the plastic and we've got this steel. Then we've got this part of the cap that secures it down to the reservoir. That's a different steel. It's even a different color. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. We've got a rubber gasket. That's 5 pieces. And I'm looking at this. I can see everything counts. There's ink. There's ink printed on the cap. So that's 6. There are 6 individual bits that comprise this cap. 6 things that had to be designed by different people, in all likelihood in different places. 6 different materials that needed to be sourced and processed and turned into the things that they represent on this cap. And each step of the way, somebody had to do that. Somebody had to form the rubber. Somebody had to print the cap. Not individually, it was done by machine, but the point is, it all had to be done somewhere. And each of the places that each of those various components took form, the lights have to be on, the heat has to be going, the electricity has to flow, the machines have to be running, the machines have to be created, all to make this cap. And on top of that, each of those 6 different items that comprise this cap all had to be shipped from someplace, either by truck or by ship or by plane. It doesn't make any difference. They had to get from their various areas of origination to where they're assembled into this cap. And then from that point, they have to go to the manufacturer, the car manufacturer, where it's installed on the assembly line. Do you realize the carbon footprint of just this one piece? And then there's the dirty little secret of the world of manufacturing. And that's that it always has to change. It always has to evolve. You can't just make this one cap. Like, for instance, at some point in the evolution of the power steering cap, it was perfected. And this might very well be the perfect one. I don't know. But at some point, it was perfected. Somebody came up with the perfect power steering cap, the perfect seal, the perfect spring, the perfect tension, right? But these engineers, they need to keep their jobs. The only way that they can keep their job, the only way that they can be employed is to reinvent it. They have to recreate it. They have to make changes to it, whether changes need to be made or not. You see what I'm saying? So now you've got all these different variations of this cap, these caps, with all of the different specifications, all of the different generations of them, for all of the different manufacturers. Think of how many different power steering caps there are currently in the world. I know I'm going on about this, but this is important because this is a very insignificant part. And this is one of hundreds of thousands of parts that make up that vehicle, from bumper to bumper, from the bottom of the tires to the roof rack on this thing. Every single component on it has this same story. The manufacturing, the support behind the manufacturers, the vendors, and all of the various processes is absolutely bigger than any you could possibly imagine. The carbon footprint of the industrial machine, not just the individual manufacturers, but the entire global industrial machine that's needed to produce the parts to create a new car, is unimaginably huge. Do you get the point? Do you get the point? So now every time the manufacturers create a new car, let's say an energy efficient car, something that's aerodynamic and has, electric power, sustainable, all of these keywords that they throw out there. it all still has to be built from scratch. It all has to be designed and built from scratch. And all of those factors, all of those points of energy usage, and therefore carbon emissions, they all have to be fed. It's a machine. Every time they make a car that's disposable, every time they add a complication to a vehicle to make it less serviceable, to shorten its potential life after the warranty and the loan period, is a huge mark against any type of environmental progress that they may have made through a more efficient car. See, we're really on the same page, just the different ideology. Classic car people are keeping these old cars alive and thus reducing the demand for new parts. We're saving the planet. You don't realize it. We're saving the planet. Me and Greta are actually on the same team, just with different ideologies. And this is a discussion that needs to be had. This is something that we really need to talk about because we are polarized. The car community, nobody wants to see the other person's side. But that's a big part of it. Now imagine how much energy could be saved. Imagine how much carbon could be reduced or eliminated from the air if, let's say, 25% of the automotive fleet out there had the capability of going past its 20th or 30th birthday, that they don't have to be manufactured. Imagine if the manufacturers didn't redesign everything every 2 or 3 years, a new system, a new, right? Imagine if they just stuck with a basically simple, and it's been done before, very successfully. Look at cars like the Volkswagen Bug or even the Lada that have had production runs that span, even these Jeep XJs, they had production runs that span decades. They were the carbon footprint or the carbon emissions saved by the manufacturers by maintaining a basic car for many years. It's huge. But this is stuff they don't want you to talk about. This is stuff they don't want you to think about. They just want you to think about, go buy a new electric car, go buy a new hybrid, go buy a new something, save the planet, obey, consume, obey, consume. Does it make any sense? Do you see where I'm coming from on this? Like I said, there's a lot I want to cover in this general topic. And tomorrow I want to talk about fuels. I want to talk about some of the misconceptions and some of the things that people just don't think about when it comes to fuels. Not only lithium-ion batteries, but gasoline, alcohol, hydrogen. I want to cover all of that stuff. And then I want to cover the cars themselves. So this week, I know we're definitely getting away from the hot rod stuff right now, but I really think this is important. Nothing I'm saying here is profound. Nothing I'm saying here is revolutionary. Nothing here is really, controversial. But this should get the wheels turning, and hopefully it gets some discussions going. I don't know. We'll see how it rolls. I'll see you tomorrow.